welcome. Welcome back. Hope you are well. Good to see you. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay, good. I accidentally renamed one of you. Sorry. I was trying to rename myself. I have two computers logged in just in case I drop from one of them, and also I have another one used for like observing. So I don't want you to use that other one for chat because I might not see it. So that's why I was renaming. And then I messed up Natalie's. Thank you. Okay. All right. We're live on the stream. And don't forget, guys, in case I haven't mentioned it in a while I do live stream it for your convenience, if you're sick or have to miss part of it or something, you still have to be here for a certain amount of time. And Zoom records that time. So around the mid to later part, maybe 2/3, 3/4 of the way through, if anybody's worried about their time, I will check. I have to do a report along the way, and I'll let you know if you're in danger of missing too much time, in which case you wouldn't be able to sit for the exam. And along those same lines, I don't want any rude awakenings either. Don't forget those class marker exams. I'll let you know along the way. You just did the quarter term one. Hopefully all of you did it. The midterm should be coming up. I think you will have covered enough material once we finish finance. Once we finish the finance chapter, that's about 4 more chapters from now, maybe 2 more weeks. Then you'll have enough under your belt to do the midterm exam. But there's 6 of them in total. And so you have to have gone through all 6 before you will also be allowed to take the exam as well. Don't wait till the end. I've actually amazingly seen a couple of students before not even take them along the way. And I'm like, how do you not do that? That's just like the best way to prepare. After you learn the material, it's all about practice exams. I've had a lot of students with success, and they attribute it to lots and lots of reps through practice exams. So don't forget the resources there. We give you 2 final, a state and a national final exam, 2 tries for each. The midterm, the quarter term, everything has 2 tries. If you have questions about them, let me know, because we don't give you the answers. And so that's to make you work for it, because you don't remember it if you just see the answers too easily. And I'll certainly take a look and let you know what's up. And then don't forget there are other resources. I believe PSI, while I haven't done it myself, PSI, the same company that tests you after you pass the class exam and move on to the next phase to actually get your license, they offer a practice exam for some kind of amount of money that I don't know. Another resource is Learn, Test, Pass. Learn, Test, Pass. I'll write it in. And they offer access for an amount of money. It's like $50 for 90 days or $75 for 120 days, something in there. And you can buy access either to the national portion of their test bank, which is 800 different questions, or the state portion, or both. The state one is like 400 questions, so it's a total of 1,200 between the two for an amount of days. And you can just, what you do is you log in and you say, make me a 50 question test or a 20 question test, and they pull from it. And you could just keep quizzing yourself, because it really does help to apply the material to test taking questions. We got a little glimpse of that with some fun last night with the Kahoot. I'm going to try to implement more of those. Got a good response, and I do get it. I know it's much more fun than me preaching at you all the time. And I'm going to do a little something extra tonight too, and have you do some group work to kind of recap and identify where some of these provisions are on the listing agreement and the buyer agency agreement, and the working with real estate agents disclosure. I'm going to give you those PDFs once everybody's in the room. I'll give it another little bit after we do our review, and then let you have those PDFs in front of you. You could access them now because they're all in the Google Drive, but I'll make it convenient, throw them in the chat. And I'm going to divide you up into, I think, 5 groups of 3 and give you an amount of time. We could make it like a race, give you about 10 things to look for, go find. And then I want you to go find them and write down and come back and tell me which page of the listing agreement and which part of the page, top, middle, or bottom. That should get it done, right? Without having to get too detailed. I think that'll help you apply it to real world, because those are actually the real agency agreements that we use out there. And I think that should help you remember on the test instead of just yet another slide you had to look at. But first, this is such a high ticket item chapter that I think it's important that we keep quizzing it. And so, with your permission, or without, get that phone out. Let's do it again. It's not the same one. It's some of the same questions that seem to be problem questions, or that I think you're almost absolutely going to see. And then some of them most of them are different from what you saw last night, but it's the same topic of agency. And so I think it's helpful to apply your knowledge, your content knowledge, with a time, because the test is timed for that matter. It won't have bells and whistles and colorful answer choices, but you do have to work under pressure. So all the better. See, was it Zach? Did you have any luck? Was it you getting your $500 from your neighbor? Who won last night? No luck. I'll write you a note this time. That'll work. I'm a pretty big deal. I'm sure your neighbor knows me. Got a couple more, I think. Sometimes it drops you off. Sometimes the screen freezes, and that's annoying. But the old go out and come back in sometimes works. And don't forget the pin is at the bottom of the screen pretty much the whole way through, so you can get back on. As needed. Anybody having trouble? Sticking at 11 for some reason. That's funny. So we dug into chapter 8 last night, and we'll finish that tonight. Most likely, if we do finish it tonight, we'll keep on going in order. And the next thing is another big chapter. It's about contracts. So 8 took what we learned from 7 and applied it more specifically to the actual North Carolina application and some contracts, agency agreements that we see in the real world. So let's give it a go. Join on if you're not yet. If you're having trouble, let me know. And you can always join up if you get knocked off. All right. Some repeats, but mostly new stuff. The following are 3 ways to work with a buyer, except what? Seller's subagency, buyer's agency, designated dual agency, or broker agency. It is broker agency. We didn't do anything about broker agency. That's not even a thing. Seller subagency is what we're looking for. Broker. Sorry. Yeah, broker agency is the right answer to the question because that's not a thing. So good job to 5 of you. Green was the right answer. Sorry. Even I get it mixed up. That except word can really flip your brain around sometimes. Don't forget though, we can certainly work with a buyer as their agent, called a buyer agent. We can work with them as a designated agent, designated dual agent, because we would be their broker. We'd be their broker helping that buyer while a different broker in our same firm is helping the seller. That would be designated dual, and that's something that happens with buyers all the time. And we could also work with a buyer as a seller's subagent. In that case, they have not agreed to hire us as a buyer agent. Therefore, we're forced to work with them sort of as a seller subagent. That's the only option. If they don't sign buyer agency with us and they won't sign anything, then if we're going to continue working with them, our only option is seller's subagency, right? That's the default. That's just the way it happens unless they sign it in writing as buyer agency. Hopefully that will stick in your heads, because just really go back over that material. There's a 4th one. There's plain old dual agency too. So there's 4 total ways you could work with the buyer: seller subagency, buyer's agency, dual agency, or designated dual agency. All of those would involve working with a buyer. And what's the other word for when you're working with a buyer? The S word. When you're working with a buyer, the one that you hear the word and you still don't know if it's seller subagent or buyer agent. You just know that it's on the buyer's side. That agent is helping the buyer in some way. There you go. Yeah, selling agent, ING, selling agent. Careful, it's definitely ING, not seller's agent. That would be the one helping the seller. That's the listing agent. But selling agent is the one on the buyer's side. We just don't know when we hear that term. Are they a buyer agent helping the buyer, or are they a subagent to the seller helping the buyer? I get it, guys. I know it's confusing and it's like, why can't we just rename things? Believe me, I would if I could. As a seller subagent, you can't let them tell you confidential things, because you really owe your loyalty to the seller, but you're just kind of helping that buyer because there's no other option. They haven't given you the other option of hiring you in writing as their buyer's agent, right? Good job, Alyssa. What is first substantial contact? What is this thing, first substantial contact? When they're discussing money and motivation, when their finger glows red, when they tell you their name, or when you give them your business card. You got it. Money and motivation. Well done. We accomplished that goal. Everybody got it. Agency is the fiduciary relationship between what parties? Principal and agent, principal and the broker whose face is on the sign, firm and the provisional broker, or seller and buyer? If you haven't answered yet, let's think about the version that is definitely between the client, right? Principal and the broker whose face is on the sign. So, you have a point there. I could word this question better. So yeah, there is fiduciary between those parties. I guess originally the point of the question was who owns the agency agreement. That'd probably be a better question to ask. In which case it would be the red one. It's between the principal and the firm, the agent, the firm being the agent. But you, the one whose sign is in the yard, the one who's carrying out the actions on behalf of your firm, certainly have fiduciary responsibility to them as well. So sorry for the word I can't think of. I'll word that better. Definitely not green. Green would be what a contract is. The seller and the buyers who are the parties on a contract, not who would be between the parties in an agency agreement. What terms of loyalty does the buyer owe the agent in an oral buyer-agency agreement? Whatever commission is mentioned on the listing, eternal love and commitment, none, or a certain time period of commitment. What does that buyer owe you if you agree to oral buyer-agency with them? You got it. Nothing. They owe you nothing. Oral buyer agency is a one-sided relationship. You have to give them all of all of your fiduciary as if it was in writing. Buyer agency as if it were in writing. But since it's not in writing, they don't owe you anything. They can go somewhere else with no recourse available for you. Doesn't matter about commission, doesn't matter about time. They owe you nothing. Must an oral buyer agency agreement be reduced to writing before making an offer? Yes, they are. Yes, they do. They do have to be reduced to writing before making an offer. Right? That's the whole thing about it. You can offer oral buyer agency to them, in which case you do all of that you would normally do as a buyer agent. You are their buyer agent, but you're not necessarily their only buyer agent if it's not written. And so you cannot be an oral buyer agent for the whole way through. You'll never get paid if all you are is an oral buyer agent. It does not survive the contract being written. You got to turn it into written buyer agency before you write that offer for them. So, yes. Yes, oral buyer agency must be reduced to writing before making an offer. Yes, red. Oh, you did? That's the glitch. That's the gremlins in the system, I guess. Okay, good. That makes me feel better. Oh, yeah, it does say, let's see, must already. Yeah, that's just a mistake. Good. I'm glad. You got it right. It is red. Good job. I'm glad that we caught it. I need to go back through it and correct some stuff. So well done. In dual agency, the broker can neither help nor hinder either party. I messed it up for you, Marcus. Broker can neither help or hinder. That is true. You got to be even. Got to be in the middle. You have to be more of a moderator or mediator. You cannot give favor to one or the other. Designated agency is between a provisional broker and their broker in charge. That is not allowed, not true. You cannot have designated agency between a provisional and their BIC. That is not allowed because that BIC needs to be able to confide, or the provisional needs to be able to confide in their BIC for every transaction. Therefore, impossible to do that if the BIC represents the side of the transaction opposite what the provisional does. So answer is false. Agency agreements have to be accompanied by an upfront deposit, verbal only, signed after the offer is accepted, or in writing. Well done. Good job. Easy points. You'll get that one. What is it called when a broker in charge designates two different subagents, one for the seller and one for the buyer? You got it. Designated dual agency. What's happening here is officially the broker in charge would assign one for each one. In real life, it's probably going to be a listing agent runs across a buyer. That buyer doesn't want to do true dual agency. And so it wouldn't be unheard of that listing agent just called a friend or another broker in their same firm and didn't involve the BIC, unless there's a firm policy that requires the BIC to pick the designated dual agent for the buyer. But it doesn't have to be that way. So yes, could be that the BIC designates two different subagents, one for each. That's designated dual agency. Agency agreements can terminate in all of the following ways except what? A death of either party, foreclosure, renewal of the agency agreement, mutual agreement between the parties. So obviously if you renew it, it's not terminating, so you didn't fall for that. Good job. You could, though, agree to let each other out of an agency agreement. So green is a way that agency agreements could terminate. But you can't just fire each other. That means it's bilateral. An agency agreement is not unilateral. It's bilateral. So if you want to get rid of the seller, you're just so over how terrible they are to work with. You can't let them go without them agreeing to be let go. On the same hand, if they're mad at you, they can't fire your firm, you and your firm. Your firm would have to agree to let them out of that agreement. And so they might be mad at you and say, I don't want to do this anymore. I found out my cousin has a license. I want to let them be my listing agent. And they would say to your BIC, so I'm out of here. I quit. I'm firing you. And your BIC would say, well, if you recall, the listing agreement is between you and our firm. It's bilateral. We would have to let you out. So sorry, we're not letting you out. Got 4 more months on this listing agreement. Therefore, you're stuck. They might also say, yeah, okay, we'll let you out if you pay us $1,000. They could charge that seller to let them out of the agency agreement. Business decision, right? They may or may not want to. I had a friend and she chose to leave her firm because the management changed and she didn't like the new manager. They kind of let her down, and she had 10 listings. And so when she went to leave her firm, guess what happens when you want to leave your firm? What happens to your listings? Any ideas? You, as the broker who has the listing, you're not even allowed to tell the seller that you're leaving. It's got to be your BIC that gives them that news. Now think about it. They probably listed with your firm because they were friends with you, or because you built a relationship with them. So they don't really care that it's your firm as much probably as it is that it's you. So if you're leaving, they might just very well want to go with you, but it's not up to them or you if they can go with you. You got to sit back and wait for your broker in charge to contact them first, not you, and then say to them whether or not they'll let them to go with you or not. And so what she did was left, and the broker in charge called all of her sellers and said, "Hey, Dana's leaving, but we're going to reassign you to another great agent within our firm." And they said, "We don't want that. We like her. We want to go with her." And they said, "Well, in that case, we don't have to let you out, but we'll let you buy yourself out of it. And if you pay us $1,000, you can go ahead and leave and go with her." What's the alternative? They sit there and ride out the duration of the listing agreement. And if it's 3 or 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 more months, what are they going to do? Are they either going to let that same firm with that new agent within the firm represent them, or they're going to sabotage the showings and not let it be shown because they're mad about it? You know, it could get awkward and get messy. But it's a business decision for that firm. It's up to the firm whether or not to let them out if they want to leave, in both directions. I don't remember what actually happened with that situation, but I think some of them did buy their way out and some of them just let it just dwindle away to nothing and waited the rest of their time. They might have had another month or two of listing duration before it expired, and then they were free to go to do whatever they wanted. First, substantial contact can happen in all of the following ways, except what? That time when we start talking about money and motivation. Phone or text, email, in person, or after you write the offer. Yeah. Can't do that first substantial contact after you write the offer. That needs to happen before you enter into the offer phase. So first substantial contact should be by phone, text, email, in person. Not allowed to write an offer. What's the problem with after you write the offer? Well, you haven't even told them how agency works, and you certainly haven't had them sign some way that you're going to work with them. So good job. Most of you got that. Great job. Agency agreements have to have what? An expiration date, a non-provisional agent, a buyer client who is approved for a loan, or a free chocolate chip cookie. You got it. Got to have that expiration date. It would be nice if they had cookies. I worked at a hotel, DoubleTree Inn, I think, and they give a cookie when you check in. I gained a lot of weight that summer. A lot of broken cookies. Oops, better eat this one. Do potential clients have to sign the Working with Agents brochure disclosure? Potential clients, do they have to sign it? They do not have to sign it. And if they don't sign it, what do you do? No, I get you. Saw you in the chat. I get it. Sometimes your finger slips. Sometimes you answer the wrong thing. Sometimes you answer the right thing and it counts as the wrong thing. So no problem. Yeah, we have to document that they wouldn't sign it. You bet. They wouldn't sign it. Just write on there date, time, wouldn't sign it. As long as you have the document in your files for those 3 years that you're required to. That could be in writing. I mean, that could be printed like a hard copy that kills trees, or it could be an electronic version. Either is fine. When does the buyer agency agreement have to be put in writing? Oh, sorry. At time of offer, when you show the first home, when you meet at Starbucks to talk about the areas they like, or when you have them sign the working with agents disclosure. Well done. Good job. At time of offer, definitely no later than time of offer. What's the problem with the green one when you have them sign? That would be great. Ideally, sure, go for it. But they don't have to. You could still work with them. What's one way you could work with them once you've had them sign the working with agents disclosure, but they refuse to sign anything else? Can you still work with them in what way? Yeah. Also, what else? There's another way. Sub-agent, sure. There's 2 kinds of buyer agency. There's the written kind and the oral kind. You could be an oral buyer agent for them. So that works too. But at the very least, you got to have that written buyer agency at time of offer. When must brokers disclose agency status to buyers and sellers? When they feel like it. At first substantial contact. At first designated agency contact. At first terrestrial contact. There you go. That phrase, at first substantial contact, is what it's all about. Now, this is when you meet an unrepresented person for the first time. Let's make sure that we have this distinction. Maybe it's at an open house. You're sitting there with the milk and cookies, lemonade, whatever. They walk in. It's your listing. You need to make sure they understand not to tell you anything yet that they wouldn't want to know, the seller to know. However, let's change up the circumstance. If you have a buyer client, and let's say you decide to meet at the house that you want to show them, but they're late. So you get there early and the seller is trying to get all the kids into the van so they can leave and get out of your way. And you go ahead and walk up to the door, and then you run into the seller. Well, you need to tell that seller right away, oh, I'm the buyer agent. I'm here to meet my clients. So that's called first initial contact. In that situation, when you're working with a buyer as their buyer agent and you run into the seller or the listing agent, like on a showing or when you present your offer, you need to go ahead and tell them who you represent immediately. That's not substantial. That's initial, first meeting of them. So a little distinction there. The first substantial contact is when you either meet a new person at an open house or in the grocery store or at Starbucks or on the phone or by email, someone who inquires on your listing or just meets you in the course of your life and starts talking about their money or motivation. Put on the brakes, explain to them how things work before you continue and let them keep talking to you about the money or motivation. All of the following have to be in writing except what? Listing agreement, written buyer agency agreement, property management agreement, oral buyer agency agreement. Good job. Oral buyer agency agreement is not something that has to be in writing. Well done. Is a transaction broker situation allowed in North Carolina? Transaction brokers are not something we do here. We don't do transaction brokers. What is a transaction broker? That's someone that just oversees the transaction. They don't represent either of the parties, not the buyer or the seller. We got to have representation in North Carolina. You got to represent one or the other or both, but never neither. Never neither. So transaction brokerage not allowed, not something we do here. If the house burns down in a fire, who decides how to move forward? We haven't covered this yet. That's in chapter 9. Sorry, this slipped in there. But make your best guess. If the house burns down in a fire and you're under wait a minute. No, we are on a listing. Oh, shoot. No, it would be in a contract. Sorry, guys. In a contract, we have a contract, not just a listing. House burns down. Is it the seller or the buyer? And I apologize again for this question being in here. We didn't cover it yet. But here's how it works. We're in a contract. We're under contract. The buyer's working on trying to buy the house. They're working on getting their loan approved. They're having inspections. The seller's letting inspectors come in. And in the meantime, sometime at some point, the house burns down or blows up. It's destroyed. Well, maybe the seller loves the neighborhood, but has always hated the house. Maybe it's like some house they just don't like the look of it, but they love how close it is to everything they like to be near. And they're thrilled at first because they don't know the rule. They're happy. They're like, nobody was hurt. Let's just add that to the mix. Nobody was there. Nobody was hurt. Nothing was in it that they cared about. And so now they think, oh, we get to get our insurance proceeds, take it off the market, and build back what we want to. But that is not the case. Whose decision is it to back out or to go forward if the house is destroyed in an under contract situation? The buyer. It's the buyer's decision. The buyer could choose to get out of it, get all their money back, or the buyer could go forward and get the insurance proceeds themselves. Go forward with the sale and they get the proceeds to do with it as they wish. Little nuance there. We'll get more into that contract related stuff in the next chapter. Who actually owns the listing agreement with the seller? The provisional broker who signed the listing with the seller, the non-provisional broker who signed the listing, the firm, or the broker in the cubicle next to yours. The firm owns that listing agreement. It's up to the firm to let people out if they want out. A broker cannot be a designated agent if they don't like the buyer or seller, they know confidential info about the other client, they are still a provisional broker, or they haven't paid their renewal fee. Well, let's ignore green. Don't answer green. I should reword that. Broker cannot be a designated agent if they know something confidential about the other party. You got it. You can certainly be one if you're still provisional. You just couldn't be one up against your BIC if you're provisional. But you could be one against another provisional or a non-provisional. All of the following can do designated agency except provisional broker versus provisional broker, BIC versus non-provisional, broker versus provisional broker, or BIC and provisional broker. Well done. BIC versus provisional broker not allowed in designated dual agency. It is allowed in regular dual agency, but not designated. And by the way, when you see the word non-provisional broker, it means the same thing as just plain old broker. So be watching out for that on the test. They'll probably just use the word broker by itself. But broker, non-provisional broker, and full broker all mean the same thing. Who is an agent of an agent? A principal, a buyer, a firm, or a subagent? Subagent. That's the agent of the agent. Good job. Subagent of the firm's the agent, the subagent is the agent of the agent. I know. It's like, what? Just stop. What type of agency is either written or verbal? Express, implied, broker agency, or specific agency? Express agency can be written or verbal. It means you were intentional. You told, you said, you wrote somewhere or another. You expressed what you wanted to accomplish. Implied agency is based on your actions, assumptions based on how you're behaving. Nothing is said specifically. They're like, oh, well, she's doing that, so she must be an agent. Got to actually talk about it or write about it for it to be express agency. Oh, the PIN is 950049. Welcome. Designated agency is a form of dual agency. True or false? That is true. Well done. Undisclosed dual agency is legal in certain situations. True or false? That is correct. Never legal. Undisclosed dual agency, never allowed. Got to make sure they know who you're representing in dual agency, especially. Do all agency agreements have to be in writing? Oh boy, this is a tricky one sometimes. I told you it was tricky. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Those of you who said no, you're thinking, yeah, but what about oral buyer agency? And I get it. But let's reword the question a little bit. And that's how the test is probably going to consider it. If we reworded it to say, do all agency agreements eventually have to be in writing? Then the answer is what? Yes. So when you just see it asked like this, the answer is yes. You just got to say yes. Because, yeah, we do have oral buyer agency, but it can't get you paid. It can't make it all the way to the closing table. It would have to be turned into writing before you could finally get to closing. So I know what you're thinking, but I get the logic, but got to go with it. All agency agreements have to be in writing. Now you know. When must working with agents brochure or disclosure be sent to the potential client? Immediately, 3 days after talking about it, within 5 days, or at time of offer. Meaning like you're talking to them on the phone, explaining it on the phone. At what point do you have to send it to them? So both of these answers are officially correct, right? It's immediately but not later than 3 days. However, if both answer choices are in the available options, the best answer is immediately. The best time to get it to them is immediately. If I had not put immediately as an answer choice and had like 7 days, 3 days, 5 days, or 9 days, best answer out of those would be 3. And that's more of a, I just wanted to give you that as a lesson in how to take this test more so than anything. I know you know the content, but best answer choice is what you're always thinking of when you're looking through these things. And immediately is the best time to provide it to them. And that means shoot it to them in an email, right? We don't have to put it in the mail and lick a stamp anymore. Is a contract terminated upon the death of the seller? That's another one for next chapter, but this will be a little bit of foreshadowing. You're under contract. You have a buyer and a seller in place trying to make your way to the closing, but the seller falls off the lawnmower in the front yard and dies a week before closing. By the way, true story. Had a first time buyer, and we were marching right along. And like a week before closing, the seller died while he was mowing his grass. And so what happens when that takes place? It does not kill the contract. Death of the seller does not make the contract go away because the estate of the seller still has to carry it out. The heirs, the estate would still honor the sale. Not even an option. Still going to be that the buyer can buy it. And so my buyer just said, well, gosh, that's terrible. Sorry to hear that. And it took another couple of weeks for them to, handle what they needed to handle. Obviously a funeral, terrible, but, to get back on track and have that closing. Does buyer agency agreement have to be in writing from the beginning? Wow. Oh, there it is. That's crazy. Okay, there we go. No, it doesn't have to be in writing from the beginning. It can start out being oral buyer agency. And my screen froze up for a second there. What does a signed working with agents brochure accomplish? Establishes buyer or seller agency between broker and client, proves that you explained agency to them, allows you to write up an offer on their behalf, proves you are a real estate broker. Good job. Proves that you explained agency to them. It definitely does not establish the relationship. It's just an FYI. Here's how this works. Here are your choices. Here's what I offer to you as optional representation. But that's a big testable item. So get this one right. Definitely blue. Proves you explained it to them. That's all it does. After you have them sign the working with real estate agents disclosure, then you're going to pull out a buyer agency agreement or a listing agreement or whatever and try to get them to sign that. And then if they refuse, in some cases you can go forward. If it's buyer agency, you can keep going. You could choose to be an oral buyer agent for a little bit. But if you're talking to a seller at a listing appointment and you explain the working with agents disclosure and they refuse, they say, well, I don't want to sign that listing agreement. I just want you to put the sign in the yard and just go ahead and get it going. Sorry, can't do it. Can't do any listing activity until you sign this listing agreement. So that's not the same thing. There is no oral listing option. Caveat emptor means what in Latin? Let the seller beware, let the agent beware, let the buyer beware, let the firm beware. Let the buyer beware. Good job. Let the buyer beware of who? Who does that buyer need to be aware of or beware of? Tell me in the chat. They got it. The seller. Because, hey, buyer, the seller doesn't have to tell you anything. They could say no representation. I'm not telling if something's wrong with it. You're going to have to find it out for yourself. Hire an inspector. See if you can find it. Now, that seller can't go to great lengths to hide something, but they don't have to point to everything either. So let the buyer beware. The buyer has fair chance to do their studies and investigation as they wish. All right, there we go. That was a big one. Good job, Bryant, Heather, and there it is, Zach again. Good job. Now you got $1,000. Well, your neighbor better hope you don't win next time. All righty. Let's dig into this a little bit. Take our break in a moment. All righty. So in chapter 8, we got into what actually these things look like, especially the various things that must be in an agency agreement. We know that they have to be signed by everybody. We know that they have to include a license number of the broker. There is a place for the firm license number, but the testable thing you're going to have to say or know is that the actual broker who's doing the listing, that's whose license number we're talking about. Must also have an expiration date. You can't have any agency agreements that just last forever. And then finally, that fair housing language has to be in there too. We talked about the reason for a listing agreement was so that we could get paid, have some proof that they wanted us to do this thing. That's really the main reason. They would love for you to list it without being obligated to pay you, probably. We talked about don't solicit other people's clients provision in Article 16 of the Realtor Code of Ethics. The do not call rules, what are they for if you've purchased with someone? You have a past customer. How many months are you still allowed to call someone on the do not call registry list if you had a sale with them? How many months is that one? It's okay if you see it on the slide. We'll just consider it visual and auditory reinforcement. And tactile, because you're putting it in the chat, right? How many months if you help someone with a transaction? How many months do you have that you can still call them on the do not call registry? You can still call them for 18 months. Good job. If all they have done is made an inquiry, then you can call them for 3 months. You got 3 months to call them after that inquiry is made. We cannot call a for sale by owner who happens to be on the do not call registry unless we actually have a buyer for their home. And then we also never call the sellers of listings listed currently. Never can solicit other people's listings. But you're free to mail, you're free to door knock, you're free to email. That email, here's a testable thing. The email has to have an unsubscribe option or an opt-out option. But besides that, it's all fair game. Talked about when some broker, active broker from another state wants to refer someone to you, when can you pay them a referral fee? What's the requirement? What must they not do if you agree to pay them a referral fee and they're licensed in another state but not North Carolina? Stay out of the state. The transaction, sure, but also stay out of North Carolina officially. If they do insist on coming to North Carolina with their granny, you can still let that happen, but you just can't pay them a referral fee. And if they really insist, if the reason that they wanted you to pay them a referral fee is so they could turn it over to granny, then you can accomplish that without even messing with the referral fee. You can say, well, instead of that, you bring granny on yourself, you come along for the ride, but I'll just give granny a reduction or a rebate or something. I'll give her a buyer agency rebate. You can rebate your clients. You can be a buyer agent and give your client as much of your commission as you want to, as much as your firm and BIC will allow you to. That's okay because your buyer is one of the parties to the transaction. You can also give the seller money or not charge the seller as much money. That might be the better way to say it. Sometimes in negotiations, or because maybe sometimes the agents might screw something up, the seller or the buyer or both say, well, just how about we reduce the commission in exchange for this thing that you screwed up. So you can give the parties to the transaction money. That's legally allowed even though they don't have a real estate license. There are a couple of things about the Sherman antitrust laws that we talked about. Name me one of them. Give me those Sherman antitrust law issues. Good job. Prohibits price fixing. What does that mean? What is this thing, price fixing, you speak of? Boycotting is another one. Yep. And market allocation. Good job. Commission, that's what we're talking about. No standard rate industry or a group like the MLS or a group of brokers or firms. No groups, no big groups of people can say, this is what we charge. You don't have any other choice, you clients. You have to do this or nothing. So that's not allowed. That's what the price fixing one is. The boycotting one, can't be a bully, can't gang up and not use a provider or not show a rival's listings. And you can't carve up the community and say, I'll stay out of your territory if you stay out of mine. Here's a big one. Compensation is handled and mentioned. What the agents are making is addressed in the listing agreement and in the buyer agency agreement for that matter, but definitely not the offer to purchase. It's not allowed. There's two things that cannot be a part of the offer to purchase. I'll give you another little preview. Two things that can't be written up in the offer to purchase. One of them is the commission. What the agents are making is not to be handled with the offer to purchase. Another one is a limitation of liability on the agent's behalf. In other words, in that offer to purchase, the agent can't write in, I might suck at this, so you won't sue me about it, please. No, you can't say, I'm not to be held responsible for incorrect square footage. No sort of liability release or limitation for the agent is allowed to be in the offer to purchase. I got an offer one time, and the agent wrote in the contract, in the offer, see Addendum A. And so when I looked at Addendum A, it said she didn't like that we were paying 2.5% commission to her. She wanted 3%. And she wrote in there, seller to pay 3% commission to buyer's agent. And I'm like, that is exactly what you're not allowed to do. How long has it been since you were in class? I didn't say this to her, but I just said, not allowed to put that in there. Also, the answer is no. Enjoy what you get. You get what you get. Yes. So the way it's written, the way it exists is, and we'll look at it firsthand ourselves after break. The buyer agent, when they sign a buyer agency agreement, tells their buyer, look, I'm probably going to get paid from the seller, but if I don't get enough from the seller, I'm going to have to get it from you for the rest. And that's what she should have done. Instead of being unhappy with the 3 instead of the 2.5, or however I should have said that, she could have gone to her buyer and said, look, I work for 3. I don't do this job for 2.5%, so I'm going to need 0.5% from you. She was trying to cut corners. She could have, before the offer was even written, approached me and said, would you see if your seller would reconsider about the commission? But it was attached to the offer, and that's what's not allowed. She could have tried if she wanted to, but it couldn't have been with the offer. It would have had to been separately and before she wrote the offer. But the problem was, in a market like this, we had multiple offers. There wasn't time for her to mess around worrying about herself more than her client, which is essentially what she was doing. She's putting herself over her client. Why clutter up the offer to purchase with your own needs and wishes when it should be just between the seller and the buyer? That's sort of the concept here, right? We good? All righty, let's come back. I'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay, let's make our way back together. Welcome back. Gonna warm up the dome. Okay, let's do a little bit more review, bring us up to speed, and then we'll take a look at the listing agreement. I've given you a copy in the chat, so go ahead and download that PDF and get ready for something we'll do with it later. If you didn't see it, let me know. Remember the difference between when we've earned the commission versus when we actually get it in our hands. It's different, right? We don't make it or get it until closing after the deed has been recorded, but we've earned it before that, days or weeks. Back when the buyer came along and was ready, willing, and able. If it went to a court of law and a broker sued over the commission, it would have to be all three of these things, right? The ready and willing is pretty obvious when they brought an offer, but were they able at that point? If they were trying to get a loan, they probably were not able when they brought the offer because they had to still get approved for the loan. But if they were making a cash offer, then yeah, they were able as well as being ready and willing, right? So the able part is going to depend and be further down the road in the process. We got into what we need to do to prepare for our listing appointment, whether it's a one step, or two-step. In that first appointment, you need to take them some disclosures to talk about, the working with agents one, the mineral oil and gas rights disclosure, and the RPODs, or Residential Property and Owners Association disclosure, if needed. Most of the time it's needed. But we'll take a closer look at those later. And then it's useful to get these things from the seller as well, right? Say, hey, do you have a copy of the deed? However, you could pull it yourself. And I do. I usually just bring it with me because some people aren't organized. They have to find it in the right shoebox in the attic. And you don't have to have it, but it's nice to look at it and see whose names are on there and start that conversation. Find out, are both parties on there if it's a married or a partner situation, and just kind of go from there. See what kind of deed it is. Was it a general warranty deed, a special warranty deed? What's going on with it? Any sort of weird deed restrictions? That's when you would find out if there's like the 1 in a million chance that it's going to be a fee simple defeasible or some sort of life estate. That's another way to find out, is by making sure you look at the deed. Typically, it's going to be a fee simple absolute, right? By far. But you never know. Nice to have a survey to provide to the buyer. So go ahead and get your hands on that if the seller has one. They may not. And if they don't, that's okay. The buyer's going to have to get one themselves if they want to. They shouldn't rely on the seller's survey. Let's talk about that for a second. If you're a buyer agent and here's what's been going on. You're a buyer agent. You've made an offer. You got accepted. You're, let's say, 3 weeks in, 2 or 3 weeks in after the offer was accepted. You're under contract. You've helped your buyer pick and schedule an inspector, maybe 2 or 3, like a wood-destroying insect. Maybe they added a radon inspection. Maybe they had to get a mold inspection also, the basic structural mechanical one. You're starting to talk about which items you're going to ask the seller to fix, right, based on the inspection reports. And so that buyer has paid out some money. First of all, when they made their offer, they had to pay out, let's do it this way. When they made their offer, they paid out due diligence money. And that could be anything. Let's say it was $5,000. It could just as easily be $50,000. Earnest money. Let's say another $5,000. Who knows? Could be $500 or $50,000 or $100,000. Then they had the basic structural mechanical inspection. Let's call it $600. And that person said, hey, I'm seeing some fungal growth, so I suggest that you get a mold specialist out here to take a look. That could easily turn into $800 to $1,000 because they're going to charge $3 or $4 just to come out there and do the inspection. Then if you want to know what species of mold, that's $100 per sample. So if they scrape it and send it off, there's $100. If they want to take the air reading, they've got to do 2 air readings, one on the inside and one on the outside to compare it to. So now we're easily at $600, $700, $800 for mold. And then let's call it wood destroying insect. Officially, the term is WDIR, wood destroying insect report. That's not usually that much. Let's just say another 100, but maybe even 70. Maybe radon. That's maybe another 150. Oh, and they had to go ahead and pay for the appraisal when they applied for the loan. So that was $400 at least. And they had to do a credit report, pay for one of those. And that was probably $60, $70. So what do we have? Out of pocket, $10,000. And then just for this stuff, what is that? $1,400, $1,650, $2,150, about $2,200, $2,300 just in this stuff. Plus the 10 up here. Now this 10 is going to be a credit at closing to them. That much less they need to bring. This 23 is only going to be beneficial to them if they end up buying the house, right? If they choose not to buy the house, this was a waste of money, except for the fact that it kept them from buying a house that they didn't want to buy, right? But it's nothing they can apply to another house. At least up here, half of this, if they get that earnest money back, if they back out within the due diligence period, they'll be able to apply to another house, hopefully. My point is, usually at this point, after all this has been done, you say to them, oh yeah, by the way, you should get a survey too. I don't know why, it just seems to fall toward the end of the laundry list of these things. And they say, well, how much is that? And if it's a normal neighborhood type of lot, it's probably going to be $400 or $500. Let's say 400. But if it's acreage, even 2, 3, 4, 5 acres, I mean, we could easily get into $1,000+ for a survey. And they might say to you, a survey, well, you've been $400 or $500 me to death because of all of this stuff. I'm just over it. Do I need one? My cousin said I didn't have to have one. And also the seller gave me theirs. Seller gave me their survey and nothing's different. Here's what you say. I would love for you to be able to save the money on the survey. However, if you don't, as a buyer, if you don't get a survey done at the time you purchase, listen to me, guys. If you don't get a survey done at the time you purchase, then somewhere down the road, if there's some sort of an encroachment problem, a dispute over an encroachment, then your title insurance policy will not cover that. They won't help you fix it. It won't be covered under your title insurance. And if you didn't have your own survey done when you bought it, that's huge. I mean, is it going to happen? Who knows? Probably not, but it might. The reason that is the case, the reason the title insurance company will not cover it if you didn't have a survey is if you do get the survey, the title insurance company is going to know where all the lines are, and they're going to know they're safe to cover it, right? Just the logic is infallible. So that's just the way it goes. And so what if you explain this to them and they're still like, dude, it's still like $500, $600. I'm just over it. I don't want to do it. There's a document called a professional services disclosure. I'll show it to you at some point. And it has a place where you can check off and say, I suggest you have the following done. This inspection, that inspection, the survey, pretty much everything on this page and more. If they refuse your advice, they need to initial under the waiver column. I'm waiving the survey. That way you have proof with their signature and initial next year, when indeed Murphy's Law kicks in, the worst that can happen is going to happen, and an encroachment problem comes up, and they don't have coverage assistance from their title policy, and they've got to come out of pocket to tear down the 3-car garage and move it back across the line all on their property instead of encroaching onto the neighbors, just to make it be like a worst case scenario. I heard of one survey problem where the agent did not recommend the survey. After closing, they found out, oops, the well that serves this house is actually on the neighbor's land, not our land. So they didn't have a well of their own. And so when they went to dig their own well, it had to be dug extra deep, and it ended up being like $60,000. Guess who paid for it? The agent who failed to tell them to get a survey in monthly installments for about 90 years, right? Or something, I don't know. But it can fall in your lap unless you have proof that you signed by them, that you told them so, that you can pull out of your file later down the road, right? That's how important the survey is. So even if the seller has one, as a buyer agent, you still want to be on record and have proof that you told your buyer they should get their own. But it's good to have one as a listing agent so that you can pass it along so they can make a purchasing decision at least based on that. And then just to bring it back around, we talked about 3 kinds of listing agreements. These can be confusing. So it all comes back around to in which of these allows the seller to not pay the broker. Well, in this one, the seller can choose not to pay the broker if the seller brings their own buyer. And it's also the case in an open listing agreement like this that any of those listing firms in the yard there could end up not making any money because it's whichever one brings the buyer that gets paid. Thank goodness we don't do that here. Open listings, I think, are in England, I mentioned. Seller can list with multiple firms, but more importantly, seller can find the buyer themselves and not owe a commission. We do it one of these 2 ways, but more likely this way. But even if it's exclusive agency, this is another type of agency, listing agency, where the seller can end up not having to pay you. You listed it. It's only one firm listing it, exclusive to one firm. But if the seller finds the buyer themselves, then they would not owe you a commission. And you've already spent a lot of time and money getting this thing up and running on the market. So therefore, forget this. Let's do this. Exclusive right to sell listing is by far the way we do it here. Listing is exclusive to you. You're the only firm, you and your firm, who have this listing. And then no matter even if the seller brings the buyer themselves, you still get paid. Because frankly, that's fair. Because you still do a lot of work regardless. Finding the buyer is the easy part, easily. Doing all the stuff that gets from the buyer making an offer to the closing table, that's what tests your professional ability. That's when you got to really know your stuff and know people who can guide you through the process. So exclusive right to sell, agent gets paid. I don't know how to help you remember it, except you have the exclusive right to get paid. I don't know. That's kind of weak, but I'll have to try to think. I've been thinking, but I can't think of anything better. And I think we left off right about there. So next one is this. When you are interacting with a for sale by owner, that means you're helping a buyer who wants to buy a house listed with someone who does not have their own agent. You would, of course, go to their house and explain to them the working with agents disclosure. But you are going to need something in writing if they agree to pay you a buyer agency fee. You're not just going to take their word for it. to get you from that point in time all the way to closing. Oh, hey, let's go to closing. Remember, you promised you'd pay me 3 months ago or 1 month ago. I don't remember that. Thanks for nothing. Bye. You know, you need that in writing, but it's not going to be a listing agreement. It's going to be this thing. It's called an unrepresented seller agreement or a protection agreement. So it's two pieces of paper. It's the one that's the working with agents disclosure, like we use for everybody. And then also the thing that gets them to promise that they're going to pay you, that you can hold their feet to, right? Let me see if I can find one. Hey, there it is. Okay, this is what it looks like. It's short and sweet. I think it's 1 page, 2 pages. Okay. Signatures on the second page. It just says, hey, seller who has no agent, you are representing yourself, and I'm representing the buyer in some way. It's between you and my firm. You're the owner of the property. You're trying to sell without your own broker or firm. However, I have a client that wants to see your property. And therefore, if you sell to my client, you agree to pay me and my firm this much money. 3%, 2%, 4%, whatever. Probably not what people would consider a full listing percentage, because you're the buyer agent. There is no listing agent, so they're saving money on the listing side of it. So the other one is, as is the case in all agency agreements, got to have the fair housing language, no discrimination allowed. Then we talk about the fee is going to be considered earned if the seller gets into a contract to sell with your client within X days from the time the seller signs this agreement. I'd pad that out pretty good. I'd probably make it 180 if they'd let me. Once earned, the fee will be due and payable at the earlier of either closing or seller's failure to sell because they decided not to. If they default, if they breach, you still owe me the money. That's what that means. However, if prior to this expiring and the execution of a contract to sell, the seller gets into a valid listing agreement with another firm, maybe they decide to actually list it with someone. If that happens, then they don't have to pay you the fee if that listing firm offers you a commission. So you couldn't stack it. You couldn't get the 3% that they offered in this form and then the additional 2.5, 3% that you could get from the listing firm if they end up listing with someone. That makes sense. And then seller acknowledges that the firm is representing the buyer. And so the firm for the buyer actually works for them, not on behalf of the seller. I mean, it's pretty explicit. Requires all information that's given to the firm by the seller to be disclosed to the buyer. Don't tell me anything you don't want the buyer to know, because I am them. I am representing them. They give a couple examples. If the seller discloses to the firm that they are desperate to sell by a certain date or prepared to go to a lower price, the firm would have to tell this to their buyer. So keep it in mind when talking. I mean, they're doing all they can in this form to say, don't try to accuse me of undisclosed dual agency. Can't be any more clear about how you should not tell me anything you don't want the buyer to know. And then a reminder for the agent, there's a bunch of helpful boxes like these throughout all of the forms that give you kind of as a new agent, don't sweat the forms too much, because if you just read them and just read through them ahead of time, they give you all these little tips and tricks and reminders. Oh, you might need an FHA addendum. In this case, don't forget the working with agents brochure or disclosure. And then everybody signs it. So this is called the protection agreement. The official name that you look it up by is the unrepresented seller disclosure and fee agreement. But what you'll see it referred to as on our slides and on the test is the protection agreement. Protects the buyer agent's commission, but it doesn't create an agency agreement between you and the seller because they are their own agent. Protection agreement protects you in a for sale by owner situation. There's another animal out there in the wild. Let's say that you run across a seller who says, you know what, agents are overpaid. I don't think you guys should make as much as you make. I think what I can't do is put my own listing on the MLS. Therefore, can I pay you a lower amount of money if you just give me access to the multiple listing service? Well, you just list it on the MLS. I don't need you to show it. I'll do that. I don't need you to advertise. I don't need you to make flyers or post it to Facebook. I don't need your sign. I'll put my own sign out there. I don't need anything from you except what I can't do for myself. I want to use you for the MLS only. That would be called a limited service broker. A broker willing to do that is a limited service broker. You might have also heard it called a discount broker, but we're not allowed to call it that word. Any guesses why we can't use the word discount broker? We call it limited service instead of discount. There's no reason for you to know. Just checking. It implies that there's a standard rate, right? A discount from what? It would have to be a discount from a standard commission, which there is not, right? There is no standard commission. Therefore, there can't be a discount of said standard commission. But what is happening here? You're limiting your service to them. You're not giving full service. You're giving them less. You could also call it a la carte. You know, I'll take this, but not that. I don't want your full menu. I just want the appetizer for dinner. I don't want the entree and the whatever. Why did I lose the word? You know what I mean? You're giving them each thing individually. You could make it a true a la carte offering. That could be the way you structure your business. And you could say, if you want MLS access, I'll do MLS for $1,000. If you want me to put it on Facebook and Instagram and maybe run an ad or something, that'll be another $500. If you want me to schedule appointments for you, that'll be another $600. If you want me to do professional photography for you, that'll be $300. Oh, you want aerial or drone stuff? There's another $200. Get it? You could offer this and just let them check which thing they wanted, if you want to model your business that way. Those who choose not to do limited service probably say things or think things like this. Well, I don't know which of the things I'm safe to leave off. I don't know which thing not to do, because we could get it sold in many different ways. And so I just don't want to even offer it. Here's the other problem. Here's another problem with limited service. Even though they asked you for a specific thing, they might become forgetful and they might get mad at you. Oh, this hasn't sold yet. All you did was put it on the MLS. Why didn't you try to sell it? Well, that's all you wanted me to do. That's all we agreed for me to do. And you paid me thusly. Instead of paying me my normal commission rate, whatever that is, I let you pay me a fraction of it for that one thing you wanted. But people are human. They have a nasty habit of being human. That's why dogs are better. And so they accuse you of things that aren't fair. So that might be a reason that you don't want to offer it in this way. But it's a valid way. Some people don't need all this stuff. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with limited service brokerage models, but you have to make a business decision and also see if your firm will let you. So that's what it means. But here's the important part. While you can limit your service to them based on which thing they're paying you to do, you are still fiduciarily responsible for all of the old car stuff, right? You still have to be available, provide reasonable skill and care, confidential, provide safekeeping, accounting, obedience, loyalty, disclosure, all the things. It's tempting to say, well, gosh, they only paid me $500 to put it on the MLS, and now they keep blowing up my phone, wanting my help. during the transaction. And so that's just the problem with this model potentially is you might get tired of doing work that you already got paid to do. You got paid to do the one thing they wanted. Now they're wanting more. But you can't limit your responsibilities to them. You can only limit your services to them. At the end of the day, you might have to do some stuff that you kind of end up not getting paid for. So, seller pays you to put in the MLS. Agent doesn't handle showings or negotiations. Consumer seeks advice from the broker. That's the thing. When it comes to a limited service agreement, that's between the seller and the listing agent. The buyer agent comes along with a buyer who wants to buy a limited service listing. And guess what happens if that seller has a question? They're probably going to ask you, the buyer agent, before they're going to call their listing agent. They already paid their listing agent for that one little limited piece of service, and they're not going to necessarily lean on them. They're going to lean on you. So it's going to be sort of like a for sale by owner, right? I did one time, and it was new construction, and it was a limited service, and my buyer was wanted to have an inspection, which is normal. And so I told this dude I was dealing, had to call the seller directly. That's the other thing. It usually with these limited service, it says contact seller directly for appointments and offers and negotiations. You don't even deal through the listing agent. You go straight to the seller when it's a limited service. And he was this old builder from way back, and he was like, "Oh, you want to have an inspection? That's just a ripoff. It was inspected all along the way. The city inspector came out and checked every time we had something else done, and this is just a waste of money." I just sit there and just listen to it and not say what I wanted to say. "Well, I understand your thoughts, sir. However, the buyer has the right to do an inspection, and that's what we need to do. Can we have access?" He's like, "Well, it's a waste of time and money, but yeah, whatever." I cannot tell you the obscene amount of enjoyment I got when the inspector found a major issue went wrong with it. I was there, and we went up in the attic, and in the attic at the top of the stairs, the water heater was up there, and you couldn't see the rest of the attic unless you got up on tippy toes and looked over it, and the entire half of the attic was not insulated. Just the half you could see. And if we hadn't had it inspected, we probably never would have seen it, caught it. So I got to make that phone call very passive aggressively, very sugar sweet. "Well, gosh, sir, I'm sure that you didn't realize this, but wouldn't you know it, we're going to need to get you to go ahead and insulate the rest of the attic." "What? What are you talking about?" "Well, only half of it's insulated." "Oh, yeah." So you never know. Right. And I basically had to interact with him. And there were a couple of times when he got very heated. And finally, I'm just like, you know what? I'm too old and I've been through too much. I do not need to put up with it. And so I called his agent and I said, "Look, we went way back, me and his agent. As you know, you chose to take this listing limited service, but you can't limit your responsibilities. I'm going to need you to step in real quick and get him back on track. He's getting a little crazy. And it's not on me to get him straightened out to this level. You need to help him understand what's what." And he did. To his credit, that agent did finally make a phone call and got the guy back on track. But that's just what you deal with a limited service broker situation. But here's the testable part. In a limited service broker agreement, you limit the service provided, but not your responsibilities to that seller. Make sure you got that down. Okay. It's all about the MLS from 1960 and beyond. Cooperation, right? The brokers who subscribe to the MLS agree to cooperate with each other, agree to pay each other whatever amount is listed in the MLS. But MLSs are not statewide. There is no one main North Carolina MLS. It's regional. It's market specific. For some weird reason, our one here in Charlotte, it's called Canopy, and it hopscotches over a couple of counties to the west and includes Asheville listings. I don't know why, but for the most part, it's much more centrally located. I believe there's one over in Stanley County that serves Stanley and a little bit of Cabarrus. But the Charlotte one, Canopy one, is so big that it's really the only one I've ever used. It even covers Fort Mill and Rock Hill and some things south into South Carolina like that, as well as Gastonia, Lincoln, all the way up to Troutman and Rowan and Cabarrus and Union, all basically a 50-plus mile radius of Charlotte uptown. Then there's a Raleigh-Cary one. Then there's a Wilmington one that probably serves the surrounding counties there. So I don't know how many there are. I'd guess there's probably at least a half dozen, maybe a dozen across the state. So what if you want to work in Charlotte, but you also want to work in Wilmington? You better pony up for two different MLSs. You're not going to have one subscription that covers both. And they're not cheap. I got a price one time because I had a listing in North Wilkesboro from a family friend. It's about an hour north, close enough that I felt like I could properly service it. But I also thought maybe I should list it with their local MLS, and it was going to be maybe $200 a quarter. I would have paid $200 because I figured I'd have it sold within a month or two. But the problem was that wasn't the only fee. It was $1,200 to sign up, and then $200 a quarter. So, I could have also partnered with somebody up there that already was a member, and we could have been co-listing agents. So probably best to not go outside of your market if you're not ready and willing to pay that extra MLS fee. But there are ways around it sometimes. So not everybody is a member of your MLS. And so I've listed a house in Charlotte before where someone from like the mountains, not Asheville, but somewhere out there called me and said, I got a client and can we come see it on Saturday? And I'm like thinking, well, yeah, make the appointment through the computer, through the MLS like you normally do. And he said, no, you see, I'm not a member of your MLS, right? I'm way out here, but I'm going to drive 3 hours to come to Charlotte to show my client your listing. And I'm like, if you'll pay me. He had to ask my permission to pay him. He had to ask me if I would pay him because it wasn't automatic like it would have been if he were a fellow subscriber in my MLS. You with me? He had to work that out before he showed it, before he made the offer. So that's how the MLS works. It works amongst the subscribers to it. We agree to cooperate and compensate each other, members of that MLS. And just for point of reference, I might have mentioned it to you the first week, but I believe it's about $200 a quarter. And then another maybe $35 a quarter for the Lockbox app on your phone to be able to open up those boxes. So what's the point of MLS? This obnoxious slide. What are we looking at here? Something we wish we could not ever see again. Exposure, right? Exposure is the point of the MLS. We get a lot of eyeballs. We get a lot of people. Way more agents have the cumulative effect of every agent having, 2 to 10 buyers at any given time is always more than what one agent might have access to. So that's the big attraction, along with the stats. Those stats are great too. And those of you who are getting into this not to help other people buy, but to maybe help yourself as an investor, you don't really see yourself being someone else's agent. You just want to have access to the MLS. That's a smart reason to do it, because now you can really quickly figure out what something should probably be worth or sell for, because you get access to all of those things that have sold. And that's what an appraiser looks at. What has sold that's similar to this property. It's a big old database of things that have sold, things that are under contract, things that are active listings, the competition, as well as things that failed to sell called expired, and things that are off the market or withdrawn. The info sheet, I've shown, I think, a little bit of one to you before when we looked at the agency stuff at the bottom of the page, but it's just everything. It's the most comprehensive source. The tax record doesn't have nearly this much detail about a given property. However, who's responsible for the accuracy on this thing? Who do you think is the responsible party for what goes in the MLS? You bet. The one who put it in there. The listing agent, the listing firm better be accurate, and it better not violate fair housing. Don't have words in there like no kids. And square footage better be right. The MLS requires, most MLSs, as far as I know in North Carolina, all require that square footage be a part of it. And therefore, they better be accurate. Got to be accurate. But don't forget this question. Does the Real Estate Commission require square footage to be disclosed? Another way to say it, is square footage a material fact? It is not. But if you do choose to disclose it, or if some other entity like the MLS requires you to, you need it to be accurate. So your options are measure it yourself, get good at it and do it yourself, or hire somebody better than you to do it. But you're still liable. So make sure you do hire someone better than you so that they get it right. The listing firm and licensee are responsible for accuracy of this whole thing. It's got zoning, it's got acreage, it mentions square feet and bedrooms and year built. The remarks section down here can be useful. That's where they're going to brag about things like new appliances, new paint, new carpet. If they don't talk about any of that, then it's probably old everything. The equipment is in the middle, like gas range, city sewer, city water. HOA is down here. Is there one? How much are the dues? Breakdown of the rooms, upstairs versus down, if there's an upstairs. All that good stuff. Maybe even schools. So, to get this thing started, we have some documents to use. We've got that working with agents disclosure we've already looked at. And that's where we get their permission to, that's where we inform them if we're going to do dual agency. And if we do dual agency, we also have to get their permission to let us do dual agency or designated agency. And it looks like this, the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. I'll show you the whole thing, and that's what I put in the chat for you. What has to be in there? All the parties, names of all the parties, the terms of the agreement, anything extra. It might be that you have to write in something special somehow or other, and there's a little room for that. The legal description, got to make sure you're properly and legally describing the property. The address is not enough. Got to have one of the three forms of legal description. Meets and bounds, but more likely a reference to a prior recorded plat or deed. Listing price, brokerage fee, protection clause. Don't mix that up though. Protection clause has nothing to do with the protection agreement we looked at a minute ago. And I know that's confusing. The protection clause is one of the many provisions within the listing agreement. And that protection clause, I'll show you in a moment, says, hey, if this listing expires and the seller sells it to a buyer that came along as the result of the efforts of you, the listing agent, then you still get paid. They still owe you the commission. It protects you for some amount of days. Fill in the blank. Now, if they go ahead and relist with some other firm, you're out. It doesn't protect you. It only keeps them from going around you to sell to someone that you basically introduced, if they don't choose to relist. And then how are we going to share with other firms? We're going to pay buyer agents, or are we going to pay sub agents to seller? Both possibilities, or one or the other. So let's take a look. At the listing agreement. There we are. Here it is. So up at the top, notice what we've already preached at you a little bit. It is between you and the seller and the firm, not you. Your name doesn't go here. ABC Realty goes here. Between the seller and the firm. And if there's more names of sellers than can fit on one line, there's an addendum. There's a multiple signatures addendum that you would reference, and then have like 8 or 10 others if you had like an estate situation with 5 kids that need to sign off on this thing. When we get to post-licensing 301, when you take that, we go deep dive on this thing. So I'm not here to read 13 pages to you. Don't worry about that. I just want to point out a couple of places where things apply that we've talked about. There's a reminder of the working with agents disclosure. There's the expiration. Remember that? Got to have an expiration. That's on the first page. There is the various ways to reference the property, the first one being the address, even though that's not officially the legal description. It's an informal reference, but it still needs to be there. And then right after that on page 2 is where we get the place for the legal descriptions. Whatever you know, anything you got to describe the property, you need to fill it in completely. Don't just leave anything out. Could be the tax parcel ID number, which is like a 9 or 10 digit number. Put that in there too. But that's not a legal description. It's an informal reference, sort of like the address. If you know the lot and block number, which would be like a map or a reference to a recorded map or plat map. If you know the deed book and page, which would be a reference to a previously recorded deed, there's a place for that too. Subdivision. Sometimes there's 2 subdivisions, so write them all in there. The big section, I think we might have taken a peek at this before, of the various things that are considered fixtures. So this is what rules. Remember IRMA, intention, relationship, method, and annexation? That's all well and good for the courtroom, but this supersedes IRMA. Because it's written here in a bullet list, everybody's acknowledging, yep, I confirm and agree that all bathroom mirrors are fixtures, no matter how they are hung, and that a storage shed or a utility building is a fixture, whatever that means. I've seen some tiny storage sheds that you could throw in the back of your car. But if it's that, in other words, if you don't like how this bullet list handles these things and you want to make sure you get to keep it as a seller and take it with you and not leave it behind, then write it down here and list that it's not something that goes and that stays with the house. It does not convey with the house. So there's that one. Anything leased, like propane tanks, satellite dishes, personal property like refrigerators, going to stay behind with the property. The old college one in the garage that has all the stickers on it, we're leaving that behind for you. You're welcome. Is there a warranty that the seller's providing? What's the list price we're going to put it up for? And this is a good one. What kind of buyers are we interested in selling it to? Only cash buyers? Probably not, but we would take cash. That'd be great. Maybe cash FHA, FHA borrowers, VA borrowers, conventional borrowers. Oops, sorry. Where'd it go? There it is. If it's seller financing, if it's some kind of other financing, whatever it is, full disclosure to the seller. Make sure the seller acknowledges which of these things they're okay with from a buyer. This matters in particular because of FHA. When we get to the financing chapter, you'll learn that one special thing about an FHA appraisal, if you're gonna get an FHA loan, which is basically a government insured loan, if a buyer is going to use FHA financing and they have the property appraised to see if it's really worth what everybody agreed to pay, then that appraisal has to be done by a special kind of appraiser, one that is certified by the FHA to do FHA appraisals. They have to look harder, because what we'll learn later is FHA and VA buyers we're trying, the point of those types of loans is to help people who otherwise couldn't get a conventional loan, either because they don't have good enough credit, they don't have enough down payment, or they're a military veteran, so let's give them an extra benefit for that, and they can put no money down. And so therefore, let's not set them up for failure. The FHA or VA appraiser is looking extra hard. They're not going to sign off on a house that needs a roof next year. If the roof is in bad shape, you're not going to get an FHA loan unless the seller replaces it. Doesn't mean the seller has to replace it. It just means then the buyer's just going to have to walk away and lose their due diligence money because the seller refuses to replace it. But you never should have shown it to them to begin with if you, as their broker, realized the roof was in bad shape. You should have asked that question and looked at the disclosure. What year is the roof? Oh, it's 20 years old? Then let's just not look at it. Because you have to get an FHA loan, Mr. Buyer, and I don't want the appraiser to write it up as a bad roof and the seller to refuse to replace the roof. And now you've got to walk away because you can't get the financing. And therefore you lose your due diligence money. So it's a way to know, hey, seller, are you even going to let your house be bought by a buyer who's using FHA financing? No, because I don't want to mess with that roof stuff. Roof's too old, or it's in bad shape. Here's some other problems that the FHA appraiser will not sign off on. Broken windows, big holes in the wall, no working range or no range at all. All of those things would be money out of the pocket of the borrower. And we're trying to help the borrower, so we don't want to set them up for failure having to pay the house payment plus having to do those various repairs. That's why these things are important. Here's the other thing. Let's say the borrower is an FHA borrower. They're trying to get an FHA loan. And it is a house that needs work. No, let's just say the FHA appraisal comes in $10,000 low. The purchase price is $300,000, but it only appraises for $290,000. It appraises $10,000 low. That FHA appraisal of $290,000 has to stick to the property for 4 months. Any other FHA buyer that comes along wanting to use FHA financing is going to have to use the same appraised value of $290,000. So basically the seller wouldn't be able to sell it for more than that. And so therefore, if an FHA buyer came along, it appraised low, the FHA buyer walked away over it, and the seller put it back on the market, they're going to need to uncheck this box, because unless they're willing to bring their price down, that's going to have to be for 4 months, use that same FHA appraisal. So this is, again, the listing agreement. So in that case, we'd, as the listing agent, say to the seller, okay, let's change this. Let's uncheck this box. I'll put it in the MLS that no FHA buyers allowed, because we don't want to mess with this stuff. We don't want to have to, seller's not willing to come down to the appraised value. We'll get more into this. I'll see you in 10. Hey, brother.
You doing, sir?
Good, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good. I just want to let you know that I completely forgot about you.
That hurts my feelings.
I'm sitting here writing down everything I did this week on my spreadsheet, and I saw your name, and I said, he's going to kill me.
You said a bad word, didn't you?
I did. Shit.
That's okay. I figured you did.
I did.
I thought about reminding you, but I just wanted to see what would happen.
I've been running around like crazy. I apologize.
That's all right. It's no, I mean, it needs it, but it's not like, you know how it is. It's all weeds, so it's, some clumps are higher than others.
I'm going to do my best to get there Monday. Tomorrow I got a big job that is going to take up my whole day.
Okay.
I literally just got home and sat down and started writing.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Let's bring it on back together. I've got something for you to do. Finishing up my instructions here. All right, here we go. So I got that listing agreement up there in the chat, and then I'm going to give you this PDF. In a second, I'm going to divide you up into groups of like 3 or 4. And here's what you got. Here's what I just posted. Going to have you amongst yourselves carve up these, what is it, maybe 10 or 15 various places, various items within the listing agreement. And so if you got three or 4 people per group, just, 5 or 6 each, probably be the way to go. So you're not all looking for the same ones. And then just notate once you found it, where is it? And then when you come back to class, we'll talk about it. And just say page 3, middle of the page. All right, just keep it simple. For each of these things. So, and let's make it a race. So whoever finishes first and comes back into the room wins $500 from Zach. So good luck collecting. He'll give you that. I know he will. He's cool like that. Let me know if you don't have those PDFs available or if you need me to resend. Okay, yeah, I got you, Will. There we go. All right. You should get something on your screen that says you can join a breakout room. Do so, and I can float around to them, and I'll probably be popping in from time to time. We're not going to spend forever on this, but you should have the list in the chat that you can download. Are you talking about that's what's blurry, or the one that you could see or you're seeing on the screen? Okay, then use the one that that I gave you in the chat. I think. Did I do that yet? Yeah, I did. There it is. unless you didn't get it. But I'll try to, I don't know if it'll work. Let me try to share that part. If that's helpful, I'll be glad to try that. Yeah, be glad to. I'll resend that. There you go. You guys having trouble joining your rooms? Oh, that's weird. Sorry. Okay, let me see what I can do. Maybe if you click the Zoom button, it'll bring up the permission to join a room thing again. Trying to figure out if I can send you there. And if I can't, let's see who is out. Okay, I've got 4 of you that are still in this room, and you're all assigned, so you could just use this room to talk it out and not even worry about it. So why don't you do that? You just make this your room, and you do your exercise right here. That's cool, because I'm not sure how to send you to your own room at this point. So feel free to do what you want to do. Talk to each other and tell each other which of this list you want to look for. Split it up as you wish. And just interact with each other. I'm going to be floating around, so I won't be in here all the time. Did everybody get the PDF okay? Because I think when I go to another room floating around, that my screen that has the list right there might disappear. Maybe. I'm not sure. Oh, if you go, do you want to see all the people in a gallery? Gotcha. Right. You can hover over that list block, click on the 3 dots, and choose pin, and then that should show up biggest. But I'm not sure what's going to happen when I go to another room, if that list is going to disappear or not. Hopefully not. So we'll try. Can you all access the listing agreement PDF itself? If you can open that, then one of your teammates could read off a couple of them things for you to go find. Okay. Let me make sure everybody else is okay. I'm going to start floating. Can you guys hear me okay? Is everything working for you? Okay, good. Just want to make sure you could see PDFs as you need to. Cool. Good. Let me know if you need me. I think there's a way for you to like raise your hand if you need to get my attention while I'm floating around. Sure. Yeah. Just jot it down. Just jot it down and or you could try putting it in the chat, like direct message to me, but I just go ahead and write it down somewhere and then you can call it out when we get back together. Because otherwise it'll just be a huge list of things on the chat. Hey, yeah. Sure. There you go. I put it in the chat. You see it? Anybody need anything else? Okay. Just reach out if you need me. You're welcome. Hey, team. How's it going? It's making sense? Okay, good. PDFs are showing up and everything you need. Okay, good. Just let me know if you need something. I'll be floating around. I think you can reach out to me. Hello. Everything going okay? Good. Good. As long as you can see PDFs and do what you got to do. Let me know if you have any technical difficulties. I want to keep floating. How we doing? Yeah. Looking for the loan payoff, or where you put in who the current loan is, where the seller's loan is, like what it is. Sorry. Let me see here. Yeah, it crosses over into 8, so they might have multiple loans, so it gives you several places to put that. Anything else stumping you? Yeah. That one is going to be back. It's on 7 as well. Just look up toward the middle. Little letter E. Yeah. Just a place so that you can know who it is, so that you can give that on to the attorney when you go under contract, so they can find out what those fees are and what is owed. Might be that the seller hasn't paid when the closing happens and they need to be charged. We good? Okay. How's it going, guys? Sure. Yeah. You got it. Good job. Another group had the same question. So you're in good company. All right. Sure, that's fine. That'll be fine. Yep. You love me. I know you love me. Okay. Gonna call it here in just a second and bring everybody together. Oh. Sorry about that, Bryant. What would you saw you raised your hand? Wow, good job. Perfect. That's probably the worst one. Second column. About fourth one down from the bottom. You see it? It's right above surface mounting brackets for TV. That must be by far the worst. The worst one. Good job. Well done. How'd you like that little job? Not that great.
Could you have done without this exercise? Are you kind of over it?
Well, there's no better way than to get familiar with the form than to have to interact within the form. So would it have been better if I gave them to you in order, at least, instead of shuffling them? Who loves? Yeah, I know. That's a challenge. I get that. Okay. Well, good job, guys. Did you have any trouble? What was the hardest thing for you to find? Which one seemed to be the most challenging? I muted everybody. Sorry, I was getting a little background noise. You might have to unmute. Again, you won't be tested on this thing page by page, but I think it's good to see it in action so you can see where it actually is utilized. We do get into a deep dive of this form in 301, but good. That should do you pretty well to be familiar with this. We'll do something similar, maybe not quite as many of a laundry list, but we'll do something similar with a contract as well. We'll hit the top, maybe 6 or 8 of them. Designated seller agency, yeah. Some of that stuff really hides from you. Which one is that? It's further Designated dual agency back here, yeah. Starts on page 10, and then the actual check box or initial box is on page 11. Yeah, they got the dual agency first, and then they acknowledged whether the seller will authorize that, and then they have the designated one. Yeah. And so the ones that are, yeah, I'll bet, seller owned for at least a year, toward the back there, a little list of check boxes. Certainly the last page is probably where you figured you'd find the license number of the agent, because that's also where they sign to. The firm license number is here as well, but what they test you on is the fact that you got to have the individual agent's license number in here. It was license number. It was expiration date. That was on the first page. The parties signing, back to the back again, of course. Place for both sellers. If there's more sellers, reference the additional signatures addendum. And what was that? What else was it? Oh, fair housing language. Fair housing language is in bold. That probably wasn't hard to find because it looks the same way in all agency agreements. Very clearly spelled out. There it is, top of 5. So that one's going to look the same in buyer agency as well. Well done. Well done. I'll get those $500 to the whole group. The first one. What was the first group done? I think some of you came back into the main room. Which group was that? Okay. So now that we've seen it firsthand, there it is. At least these things need to be in the listing agreement, and we saw that far more than these things are in there. All the parties' names, the terms, the various many terms of the agreement, the legal description, the block for legal description, I think top of page 3 maybe, the listing price, the brokerage fee, the protection clause. Let's look at those two things, brokerage fee and protection clause and commission sharing. I wanted to point those out. So while the total commission is listed on the third page, seller to pay a total fee of this, percent of, could be a percentage of price, it could be an actual flat fee. Then you go on over to the next page and you outline it, you carve it up. You say, are you willing to pay a subagent to the seller? Check the box. If not, remember we saw a lot of listings that would not pay anything, so that doesn't get checked quite a bit. But if you're willing to pay a buyer agent, check this box. And then we would say how much of that total, right? If the total is 6, then maybe we're giving the buyer agent 3, maybe we're giving them 2.5 or 3.5. So that's going to be spelled out here. That doesn't mean 3% more than the 6. The 6 is still the total, but how much of the sale price is going to the buyer agent versus listing agent, if either, if applicable. And then here's that protection clause. Look at this one. If the circumstances above have not occurred within blank days after expiration date, seller either sells themselves or directly, indirectly sells, exchanges, agrees to sell the property to any person with whom the seller, the firm, or any cooperating firm communicated during the term of this agreement or a renewal. We've got to provide that list of those potential clients too, provided the names of the people are delivered to the seller within 15 days of expiration. In that case, the seller owes you the commission. If you sell it to one of those people that came as a result of your efforts, once this has expired, if that ends up selling to one of those people within fill in the blank days, I used to put 30 or 60, but somebody challenged me on it. I think I said 60 and they tried to negotiate me down to 30. And ever since then, I put 120 because I figure, and nobody's ever tried to negotiate it ever again in many years. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't apply that much. But if it does, you want to make sure you don't get done out of some commission. And then this part, this protection agreement doesn't apply if the seller gets into a valid listing agreement. If they relist with another firm after you, even if they sell it to one of your people that came while you were the listing agent, you're still not going to get paid. So that's what this thing is about, this protection clause. And they call it the protection period. But all of that is different than the one for the for sale by owner. The one that for the unrepresented seller for sale by owner protection of your commission, recognizing that FSBO is going to pay you for bringing your buyer to them. Okay. So we got those. Good job. Hopefully that made you help kind of got you familiar with what all that's about. Typically, brokerage fees are a percentage of the price. So if it's a $100,000 sale price and you're listing it for 5% commission, it's going to be $5,000. If it's one firm involved, it's going to be all $5,000 going to that firm. But it could also be a flat fee. You could put it in the MLS for $500 flat, like in a limited service listing kind of arrangement. A net fee is another option. So we've had commission, the most common, flat fee, more for the limited service model. But then there's another one called the net fee. The problem with this one is that it might induce a lesser moral broker to not be as forthcoming about the value of the property. Because the way a net commission would work is the firm keeps any amount above what the seller wants. The seller would say, as long as I get $100,000 for this, I don't care what you sell it for. Whatever over 100 you can sell it for, you get to keep. If you sell it for $105,000, I'll keep the 100, you get the 5. Well, that's all well and good if the agent's honest about what the value is. But if the agent says, well, I think it's worth like $80,000, then it sells for $105,000. The seller agrees to that, then the seller's getting $80,000 and the agent's getting $25,000. So we don't do it this way. But it just sort of like that open listing kind of agreement, the net fee agreement. It is what it is, but it's got some potential for misbehavior. What are the duties of the firm? Showings, right? Try to get showings. Give the seller advice along the way. The open, no, we don't do it this way. I mean, you could, but it's not advisable. The real estate commission would rather we not. It's not that it's illegal. You just want to make sure that you don't get in trouble. No, it's not illegal. Got to give advice to the seller along the way. Help them with negotiating price and repairs and terms. And then as we know from old car, we have to disclose. Got to have the fair housing language in there, the equal housing opportunity logos at the bottom of each page. And then it also, since it's an agreement between the firm and the seller, it spells out what the sellers are responsible for. And just think about it. If that seller is mad at you, they could try to start holding the house hostage, sort of. You still have the listing for 3 more months, but they're just kind of getting a little grumpy. They could start declining showings one after the other. And that's annoying when you're like, wait, they canceled another showing. What am I doing this for? They need to. So it's spelled out in the listing agreement. The seller is expected to, within reason, allow the showings, keep the property presentable, provide documentation to you and to the closing attorney as needed, and then cooperate with agents as promised. Pay the commission they promised. And there's something in there explicitly saying, not at closing, but The commission is earned with a ready, willing, and able buyer. Some more things. We got the earnest money dispute. If there's a dispute about earnest money, that's covered in the listing agreement. I don't know if you maybe stumbled across it when you were looking for some of those other things. The fact, how we handle earnest money when we get a contract, the fact that the buyer could include that with their offer, and if there's some dispute over who gets it, if the contract dies, then the parties would have to agree in writing before it could be dispersed. So that's handled and addressed in the listing agreement, and I explain that all the time, just so they know, just in case there's a dispute and a termination or a fall through, here's how the earnest money would play out. We saw where dual agency is addressed. It's explained quite explicitly, and there's places to initial for them to acknowledge which one they're giving you permission to do. Again, you might not even want to do it. So you might just say, this doesn't apply because I don't do dual agency. But if I do it, here's where you would give me permission to if you're going to, if you want to allow me to do so. There's a place in there explaining what material facts are, and other provisions include, like, they might want to have a pre-inspection done. A seller pre-inspection means, hey, seller, there's a lot going on with this house. Might be a good idea for you to pay for an inspection before we put it on the market. You tell me in the chat, why would that be a good idea to have a seller do a pre-inspection? Find out what's wrong with it before they put it on the market. Couple reasons. Yeah, that's a good one. Realistic expectations. Help them. Let's maybe take it off the table from something the buyer could complain about. Let's put it in as good a shape as we possibly can. Also, if it does need work, need repair, buyers, if you don't have the inspection until the buyer does the inspection, then they're paying extra attention. They're there watching. And they know, something about the heating and air doesn't work right. It needs a new heating and air system. I want a brand new $18,000 heating and air. No, we can just fix this part for $500. So if you do it before the buyer is aware and in the mix and is even present, then you can afford to do a not Cadillac version of repair. Still a good repair, still acceptable, but not the same level as what a buyer probably would want. Sort of like builder grade carpet. You ever heard that term? It's not luxurious to your feet, right? It's good enough and it's carpet, but it's not like super cushy carpet. So if there's no buyer present yet, the seller has the luxury of being more affordable with their repair solutions. So that might be one big reason to do it. Another one might be, let's go ahead and get some estimates because we know there's some pretty big items here. So before we scare off a buyer and ruin a deal that everybody was counting on, let's get it in good shape first. Well, there's lots of good reasons to do pre-inspections. Not all sellers are willing to do it, and it's not always applicable, not always needed because the house is in decent shape, and so be it. And we saw where the fixtures and personal property are addressed in there too. We talked about this tonight. Is square feet a material fact? Not material. Real Estate Commission just says if you do choose to report it, it better be accurate. We'll talk about that when we come back from break. And I'll see you in 10 minutes.
and just did it. It's 5 years. They make it so easy that you can go to like your local Staples and do your background check, right? You bring your birth certificate, you bring your social, and they make sure it's you. Done. Just there's no excuse. But yeah, I just got back from Vegas. Took some partners out there. We were hanging out there. Coming from Cali to there, and then from there to here, man, we was moving and shaking. And
Wow.
I try to act like it doesn't bother me anymore because I done been through some things. I done been in a plane that got bird struck before, and we almost died from that coming out of Utah on the way to Europe. But other than that, I'm trying to calm the cats down that I was with because they're not normally flying. But other than that, it was good times for sure. Fellowship and meeting folks, hanging out with folks, that kind of thing. But yeah, drove from here to Oregon to see my son at school, and then after that, we flew to Vegas for some time. Next thing I'm gonna be doing, I'm gonna be heading down to San Diego. I think next month, just to chill again.
You rolling?
Man, listen, man. Come on, man. COVID is over, brother. I don't have to stay in the house anymore.
Right. Yeah, you wanna, you keep it moving, man. I appreciate, I like that. I like that.
But you lucky. I'm envious of you because being in Philly, you can just get in the car and you can go
that part
45 minutes or whether, and depending on how fast you put your foot in that Lexus. We're gonna talk about that Lexus too.
Look, I got some more picks, man. I've been feeling it lately, man. I'm loving these picks. Yeah, I've been feeling it.
But you can go from Philly, you can go to New York, you can go to here and there, you can go to Virginia. I mean, it's so condensed on the East Coast, whereas California is so massive that it's a 9-hour drive from my house to my daughter's school in LA. Right, from Sacramento to LA is stupid. Right. I mean,
that's crazy.
It's tough. It's tough.
That's a lot, man. That's a lot. Yeah, East Coast, man. One thing I do love about it is, especially being around Philly. You right up the street to New York.
Yeah.
DC is equal distance away. You got Baltimore in between, Delaware in between, got Jersey in between New York and Philly. And then if you want to stretch a little bit more, in about 6 hours, you down in Richmond, Virginia Beach.
Listen, that's where my family at, man. Come on now.
Okay, all right. And if you want to take a
my Dreams definitely chopped it up with us on Team No Sleep. He says he likes that mic, likes that distinctive mic. That's a KP original.
Hey man, I'm about to change the color, man. I'm no offense to Ecam, but I'm about to lose the orange. I guess I'm gonna go. I got my yellow. I got my yellow over here, but I think I'm gonna transfer. I don't know.
Okay. Well, we're still rocking these Michael Jackson mics, though. I still don't see a reason to change the infrastructure piece, but we can always switch it up a little bit and make it look a little different.
Right. Man. So how's it going? How was your trip? How was your trip, man?
Which one, man? I stayed 30,000 feet in the air. I do. Just chop it up, right? Talk about what's going on in the world, what's going on with you, the community as well. So let me do this until KP works it out. I'll just story in a little bit. Let me go ahead and lock him in here.
What the hell was going on? Don't ask me. I don't know what was going on. This thing was just tripping, man. It ain't you. It was just, I don't know what was going on over here.
First of all, let's talk about that sweater, though. I'm going to have to find out where you get that from.
Uh-oh. So you know what?
You got it.
Listen, man.
Okay. See, I thought I was dope because so today, speaking of clothes, every quarter I get a shipment from. You ever heard of Stately? STA.
All right, let's knock out this last little bit together. Square footage. We are responsible for it. So there's got to be a guide to help us understand how to do it. Because we know that Real Estate Commission doesn't require that disclosure. It's not a material fact, but the MLS does. Therefore, we better be accurate, better be competent. How do we measure? Well, one part of that process of measuring is what gets measured. Do we measure room dimensions and add them all together? Or nope. What we do is measure the outside perimeter. We measure exterior dimensions. So if this red is the overhead view of a footprint of a very basic house, we're just going to pull tape around the entire perimeter. And if it is a perfect square like this, and they're each like 30 feet to a side, that's going to be 30, 30, 30, 30. 30 times 30, 900 square feet, right? And basically, since we're pulling the measuring tape around the outside of the property, the square footage, when you see a house that's listed for 1,800 square feet, that includes the wall thickness, the insulation, the wires, the studs, the stuff that you never see. That's part of the 1,800 that gets reported. That's what it doesn't mean you have 1,800 feet of walkable space, in other words. So the standard of measuring square footage, exterior measurements, and then what we need to report and make sure that we spell out specifically is HLA, heated living area. And so the guideline for square footage is this thing. Let me show it to you. There we go. And I'll put it in the chat. It's obviously everything's in the Google Drive, but there you go. It's this yellow book, and let's take a look at the yellow book. There we go. It says things like the fact we just talked about, that it's exterior measurement. And then you have to spell out specifically, is it heated space? Heated living area needs to be differentiated from like unheated living area, for instance, a garage. So if someone says my house is 1,850 square feet of heated living area, that would not include the garage. Does not include the garage because it would need to be just heated living area that is included in that HLA figure. And then what is also part of heated living area, it's got to be heated, but it's also got to be finished in order to be included in that main number. The main square footage of the house would be the main heated living area of the house. It's got to be heated. Notice it didn't say cooled. If it doesn't have air conditioning, that's not as important as if it doesn't have heat. It's got to be heated. It's got to be finished, painted drywall or sheetrock or paneling, carpeted floors, not just the subfloor. You ever pull your carpet up, like where the vents are, pull the grate of the vent, and you see the wood subfloor underneath the good stuff? So it's got to have finished flooring. And then there's some issues to know about the heights of the ceiling. In order for it to be considered in that main HLA number, the ceiling has to, for the most part, be at least 7 feet high. 7 feet from the floor to the ceiling. Now, sometimes there's ductwork or beams in the way, and that's allowable. You can still count that space as long as the height is still at least 6 feet 4 under those sorts of intrusions, right? Sometimes it's a sloped ceiling. The ceiling is like a vaulted bonus room upstairs. And there's a rule about that too. Let's look at it like, I'm going to fast forward, speed along to the the drawings here. Let's see this one, I believe. So what we're looking at here is an overhead view of the floor plan, right? This is the second floor, and then this part is over the garage. It's got some white bars, top and bottom. That's the attic space. The yellow part is the actual heated living area part. But notice there's a cross section because this bonus room has slanted ceilings. And let me see if I can make some more sense of it. If we're looking at the cross section, and it's like this, oops. Oh, wow. Oh my goodness. Bear with me, guys, 1 second. I hit a button and my TV came on instead of using it for a computer monitor. So here's our cross section of our upstairs bonus room. And let's say this is the floor. There we go. And so let's say there's a window on the far wall over there. A perfectly square window, because I'm so good at drawing. What if that owner had finished this room out by themselves? Again, we're looking at the inside of this thing. And maybe they chose to carpet it all the way to the edges. So this is carpet all the way. So like a human, average height human, if they tried to get to the edge, they're going to hit their head right about there. Right? You with me? As to what we're looking at here as a cross section of a sloped ceiling kind of a room. And that owner just chose to carpet all the way out and basically he's got duct work. He's got some vents for the heated part. So it's heated and it's finished. It's painted and carpeted. But how much of this room gets to be counted as heated living area? Here's the rule about slanted ceiling room like this. You find the part that is 5 feet high from the floor. Even though you could access over here, like a little kid could like sit there or even walk under it to there, but the 5 foot portion, the part of that room that's 5 feet from the floor right here and then 5 feet from the floor over here, that's how much of the floor space you get to count toward the heated living area. You don't get to count this part. Nope. But you do get to count this part. So not this part. Even though it's usable, you could maybe throw some toy boxes over there in the corner all the way down the length of the room. But as far as the number of square feet that gets to be included in the HLA, this room might be 20 feet long. And then this width here is, let's say, 10. If we were allowed to include this part and this part, that'd be another 5 on each side. So that'd be tempting. That'd be 20 feet across this much, but we can't count it. We can only count the 10 because 10 feet is where we get to that 5 foot ceiling height mark. You with me? So 10 times 20, it's 200 square foot room of HLA. That's what you could report it to be. You with me? So that's the other part, the 5 foot ceiling mark issue. Let's keep looking. What else? Stairs. That's a big testable item too. I'm just trying to show you and tell you about the ones that could show up on the test. There's a lot to this book, but you don't need to know the whole book. Let's look at a house like this where you've got a basic set of stairs, and the stairs, the hole in the second floor that the stairs lead up through, that you're walking up through when you go up the stairs. If that hole in the second floor exactly matches the dimension of the stairs, in other words, there's no like extra space that you could look down from a balcony and see the people below. unless you were looking right down the stairway. It's not like some sort of an open foyer like this kind of thing with the white L shape here. That'd be where there's a bigger hole in the second floor than the stairs would need to go up in. Let me see if I can show you a better picture. It would look maybe something like this. Like this thing. Those stairs occupy, if you were to accordion those stairs, like we're able to physically push them upward and make some more second floor from the stairs themselves, like if you could do that physically, you would still have a lot of open space, right? That's what I'm trying to get around to here. Here's another one like that, another open 2-story foyer. Here's another one. The stairs only fill up part of the opening on the second floor. You would still be able to look down from above. So the issue is, how do we count the stairs? When it's a typical set like this, where the hole matches the stair dimensions, you count both levels. You don't need to do away with the part under the stairs and subtract that out. Even if, sometimes the part under the stairs downstairs is a closet. And sometimes they even permanently close off some of it because you can't reach it, right? You'd have to like get down on your hands and knees to get down there. They might just finish it out to this point, and they don't even put a door in it. You could never even use it. You would still count it. It is still counted as heated living area. So in other words, to measure this house, you would measure the entire perimeter and you would count that entire yellow area, even the part under the stairs. And then you would measure the perimeter of the upstairs and count that entire yellow area, even the part of the stairs. So you include the stairs with the area from which they descend, is I guess another way to say it. Include the entire underneath part. You don't subtract out like a 3-foot by 6-foot section underneath or anything. So how you handle stairs is important. How you handle angled or sloped ceilings is important. Minimum 7 feet of height, unless it's a duct or a pipe, then it can go down to 6'4" and still be included in the heated living area square footage. And you're measuring the exterior all the way around. There's also a little mention in here. Let me see if I can find it. You have a responsibility when you report square footage to be accurate. And that means that you also, if you're a buyer agent, need to be able to recognize if there's an error in the square footage reported. So if you're looking at a 1,900 square foot house and it was actually a mistake and it's actually 1,800 square feet or 1,750, the real estate commission holds you accountable to know that. Recognize, oh, wait, this doesn't seem quite right. I think this is smaller than what they're claiming it is. And that's a little scary. How much of a difference can there be? How close do you need to be good? How good do you need to be in understanding what square footage is? I'm trying to find a very specific part here. I think it might be, there it is. Here it is. So how close? It says right here, deviations in calculated square feet of less than 5% will seldom be cause for concern unless the broker intentionally overstates it. We need to be good by up to 5% close. We need to be good by within 5%. So if it's an 1,800 foot house, 5% is 90 square feet. Can you tell 100 feet off on an 1,800 foot house? If you can't, go look at a bunch of houses, right? That's the lesson. You can do that now. You can go into new construction and say, could I take a look at some of your houses, take a look at your model home and get a feel. Don't let them tell you how big it is. You walk through it, see if you can guess, and then find out. And then once you get into the business and have access to the MLS, you could do that as an exercise with another buddy who's a newer agent. Pull about 10 listings and let your friend pull 10 listings and go do some preview of some of those listings. Don't look at the square feet first. Walk it, and then your friend knows the square footage, but you don't. And then you tell them what you think it is and see how close you were. And it also helps to measure your own house and kind of get the feel of how that works. What will probably happen once you measure a couple of houses is you'll decide, let me just hire this measuring out from here on out, because good grief, some houses are harder than others, obviously. So I put that square footage guideline in the chat. Take a look through that. And the testable part is the stairs count for both floors. 7 feet minimum, unless it's ductwork, and then it's 6 feet is allowable. And then the angled ceiling. What else? Heated and finished area is what we're looking for. And so you would pull your measuring tape around, measure all this stuff. In this case, the foyer overlooks the downstairs floor. So you've got to measure that white shape, that white L, and figure out how much area you have to deduct from the upstairs square footage, because you can't count that on the square footage of upstairs. And then you just write it out on a chart and add them up and figure out the total. You're going to want to report the heated living area, but you're also going to want to report separately the garage or any unheated space. There might be some overlaps sometimes in real life. There might be like the upstairs hangs over beyond where the downstairs hangs. You got right to the point. Good job. Brokers would typically pay for square footage measuring, just like we would typically pay for photographs and video and stuff. And then how much does it cost? $150 to $200. I've run across about $100 before, but it was someone who was only in the business 2 years, and I didn't feel like they were better than me at it. And if I'm paying for it to be done, they better be better than I am at it. I think he did it fine, but I don't want to hire anybody that doesn't do it any better than I do. I want it to be like an expert that's been an appraiser for several years and has had to measure lots and lots of houses, but that's just my own preference. Brokers pay for that, though, typically. Let's see. What else? Anything else? Oh, there's one of those overhangs where the upstairs floor plan or footprint is a little bigger, 2 feet over what the bottom is. Oh, here's the other one. The other very important aspect to all this is below grade square footage. What does it mean by below grade? Anybody have an idea? I'm looking for an example. That's why I keep flipping. Oh, can you imagine measuring this thing? Ugh, no thank you. Although I'd probably try. Below grade. So, good question. If you hire somebody to measure it, you are still responsible for the liability of the accuracy. So just make sure. That's why I don't want to hire somebody that's not as good as me at it. I want to make sure to hire someone else who's definitely better. All right. Yeah. Below grade means underground. The part of the house that is below the ground. So let's see what that might look like. You know, in this area, part of the country, we don't really do basements all that much. Not like a typical northern basement where all the sides are underground or undergrade. We got it like this. And so below grade for this basement space, now it won't let me zoom. Sorry. I don't know why. Oh, there we go. That entire space is pretty much all below grade, right? If you were to punch through the wall anywhere in that basement, you'd get into soil. as opposed to if you punch through the wall up here on the main level, you go into air. So that's what we mean. And what an appraiser will do for below grade square footage, it's always, listen to this, always worth less than the main level than any above grade square footage. Below grade always takes a hit compared to above grade square footage. Basements are always worth less per square foot than the main level, than any level that's not below grade. So this entire square footage of this basement would have to be a discounted from the same price per square foot of this level. And so when that really kicks in, that can get overlooked is a tri-level or a split level home. Let's see if I can find one that applies here. So here's a classic 70s era tri-level or split level. And I don't know if you can imagine it, but see, those are the windows to the downstairs, but that's clearly probably waist high, right? If somebody were looking at you from the window, you'd see their face right here because their body is below grade. So therefore that whole level down there is considered below grade, and you'd measure that square footage. It might be like 30 feet this way by 40 feet deep, 30 by 40, 1,200 square feet, but you can't give it the same dollars per square foot value as you would this one or this top level. And so that's the other square footage thing we need to talk about. Below grade counts for less. Okay. So we talked about the square footage. After that, after measuring square footage, we're on this listing appointment. Now we're gonna share with them what similar properties have sold for. What are properties like this selling for? Sometimes a regular appraiser might do that. It depends on how busy they are. They're all very busy now because there's a lot more work than appraiser. And frankly, honestly, if I could hurry up and get certified, I'd do it on the side because the business is so much of it and they can call their shots. But in order to become appraiser, you have to take like 5 classes at the community college. That's not a problem. But then you have to be an apprentice for the appraiser for a whole year and basically work full time for them for like $50 per appraisal. But once you get that, now you're like skyrocketing to getting the entire $500 per appraisal, and you basically triple, quadruple 10 times your income. So it's just a long-term thing. But the problem too is finding an appraiser willing to apprentice you, because they're essentially training their competition, their future competition. But it's good business if that's your thing. If you like the facts and figures, it's sort of like being an accountant. You know, you're really fine paying attention to the detail. So we've shared with the seller what things have sold for. And now we've determined what they need to get for it. That might not be a realistic number. Let's take a look at that. And then we'll kind of get an idea of a real world application of this concept. So if you hire me you have me come out, talk to you about your house, and you want to go buy another house, you're probably going to say something to me like, well, Neil, I don't want to sell it unless I can absolutely walk away with $150,000 from the sale after all of the expenses and your overpriced commission too. I want to make sure I get the $150 so that I can do whatever it is I want to do next. And so if we knew that the seller net, what the seller wants to net is $150,000, we're going to also counsel them and say, look, your closing costs probably going to be about $11,000. You know, depends on the situation. You've got some repairs that I think you're going to need to do in order to have a shot at getting the most possible money. And I think that's about $7,000 worth of repairs That's probably excessive compared to the average. It's just going to depend on their situation. Your loan payoff, because you still owe on a mortgage, is, let's say, $240,000 in order to pay off your loan when you sell the house. And I charge a 7% commission because I'm worth it. Now, the question is, how much would they need to sell their house for in order to cover all of these bills? They got to pay all of this money and they got to pay you. So they need to sell it for enough to accomplish all of that. So we start with the needed sales price to accomplish these goals. Here's how you do it. Well, you know what? I'm going to let you try to figure that out because I think it'll stick in your memory a little better. I'll give you a minute or so, and you tell me what you think you need to sell it for in order to pay all of these fees. Oh, home inspector. Let me think. Do I know? I think there's a course and a test. There's not an apprenticeship, I don't think, like there is with an appraiser, but you would need to be trained. I think there's on-the-job training, of course, with an inspector. But I don't think there's like the same kind of apprentice program. Let me change this chat. Okay, now it's private. So when you got an answer, put that in the chat for me. I don't know if you can read my writing. That seller net number is $150,000 they want to walk away with. Sure, we're trying to find out how much the seller needs to sell for. How much does the sale price need to be in order to pay these things and pay your 7% commission? So we know it at least needs to sell for however much this adds up to. But it also needs to sell for an additional amount to be able to pay you. Got some answers in common. That's encouraging. And don't worry if you don't get it or if you're totally confused. I really think there's a lot of value in learning a new thing by having to hit your head against the wall a little bit and really try to figure it out yourself and then see what the answer is. You'll remember it better. You'll compare it to what you did wrong if you did something wrong. All right, I think we got a pretty good representation. All right, step 1, add all the dollars you can. That's this box. That's the 150 plus the 11 plus the 7 plus the 240,000 loan payoff. So $408,000 is what the seller needs to end up with after they've paid your commission. Because once they paid your commission, they need to end up with 408 so they can pay these 4 items. So the question is, how do we get your commission into the mix? If you did this, 408 times 7% is 28,560. And then that added back into the 408 to be 436,560. If you did that, you just cost yourself a couple $1,000s. You shorted yourself commission. Why? Let's look at it this way. We get up to that 408,000 number because that's what all of these dollars add up to. Now we do this. 408,000. Oh, let me talk about one more thing. If we're charging 7% commission, what does that mean? 7% commission. The full sale price that it sells for is 100% of the sale price, right? Brilliant statement. That's 100% of what you're getting for the property. Your portion as the listing agent in this case is 7% of that. If they pay you 7% off of that 100%, then what's the percent that they're left with? What's the seller's percentage? 100 minus 7. So you could look at it sort of like a split. The seller's split of the sale price is 93%. Your split is 7%. That makes sense? So with that in mind, the seller's portion is 93%, then write this out as a sentence. 408,000 is 93% of what? And then replace the word is with a division symbol. And now let's plug $408,000 divided by 93%, and that gives us $438,710. That's what it needs to sell for. In order to pay 7% off the top, your commission, and then be left with $408,000. Let's see how much you cost yourself. Right? Let's figure out what 7% of 438,710 is. That's $30,700, basically $710. That's the commission. That's the actual true 7% of sale price total commission. You figured, several of you, 7% of 408. And don't worry about it. Everybody does it this way at first. Because why else would you think of that other weird way to do it? you cost yourself $2,150, right? So here's how you do this thing. Again, let's recap it. Straightforward. If you just want to, Neil, just quit telling me why and tell me how. Here's how the steps go. Step 1, let me get it cleaned up real quick. This type of a seller net problem, step 1, add up the dollars. All the dollars you can add up, this stuff. And in this case, we got 408. Step 2, write out this sentence. And eventually you don't have to write out this sentence. You'll just know how to do it. Oh, wait, let me add a step. Step 2, subtract the commission from 100% to get the percentage that the seller is left with. Now, step 3, write out that sentence. $408,000 is 93% of what? And then replace is with a division symbol and of with an equals mark. And then do the math. And that gets you your number. That makes sense? That division is a useful tool. We will apply it in another couple of ways. Okay, now we know what the seller absolutely drop dead bottom of the barrel needs to sell it for in order to pay you and all the other commitments they have. But we're trying to figure out what we should list it for. So the next question is, what do we list it for in order to sell it for $438,710? So you tell me, if you were a seller, what would you suggest or think that you should list it for if you need to get $438,710? I like that number, Joseph. Joseph says 450. Keep going. Somebody else give me a number. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's just going to depend on the market. It's going to depend on the competition. Maybe there's 8 properties for sale very similar to this at $449,999. And if you price at $450, there's only 3 of them for sale between $450 and $460, but there's 10 of them for sale between $440 and $449,999. Guess what? I don't like $999 strategies. They work for cars, they work for shoes, but you're not fooling anybody by $1 off on a 6-figure price, right? And so it's all about the internet search. What happens if you price at $499, for instance? Then people who set up a search to go from like 470 to 500 are definitely going to see you. Congratulations. But people who set up a search for 500 to 520 will not see you because of $1. But instead, you take Joseph's advice and you price it at 450. Oops, sorry. That was stupid. I think you know what I meant. Let me rewrite it though. If you're at $499, if you price it at $490 to $500 and your price there, you're not going to get seen. But if you price those who do a search from 500 to 520 or 30, then you're priced here at 450. Darn it, I did it again. Oh, it's too late at night. Ignore the last 2 minutes. What price are we on? Okay. Wow, it's been one of those days. One more time. Oh, I know what my mistake was. I'm an idiot. That's what my mistake was. $449,999. Okay, one more time. 440 to 450. And you're priced here. You will be included in that search result. You'll be one of however many are in that price point. But if you have a search from 450 to 460, for instance, and you're priced here, like Joseph says, you're going to show up for both of those searches. People just don't use $9.99 in their search results. So I just think because of that, you're getting seen by double the eyeballs for one little price point, one little dollar difference. But, it's different. That's another good point. Will says, I'd probably price high in today's market. That's a great point. You could probably you wouldn't probably miss out on showings if you could probably go up a little higher today than you typically could in a normal market. That's a great other point that he makes. And that's why you're in this point. That's why you're talking about this with them. You're going to say, hey, seller, we could do the old school method. We need to get 438. We could just cushion it by just a little bit, maybe 445, and then expect that people are going to make some offers lower than that and try to get them up. Or maybe we do what Will says and say, let's try to generate a multiple offer situation. We know it needs to sell for this if we verified that similar houses have sold for this. That's the other part. Is it really worth this? Because just because the seller needs to get 438 doesn't mean that the houses are selling for that. Right? In a market like this, they're probably okay. But in 2008, they might have done the research of what other homes have sold for and found that they're selling for 425. And now that seller needs to reconsider their wish list. Oh, you would like to get 150 when it's all said and done? Well, that's just not realistic, seller, because this thing is worth 425. And so therefore, 438 minus 425, you're off by at least $13,000. You're at best going to get maybe 135, 137 when all is said and done. Or heaven forbid, I could change my commission, but let's not go there, right? That's another reason to do this math. So you can decide, do I want to charge this entire amount? Or do I want to help that seller if they can maybe not need quite this much because maybe they just won't buy the fancy new lawnmower they wanted to get with the new house. And then you maybe could wiggle around a little bit on your commission. It doesn't matter what the seller needs or wants to get. It doesn't matter about these numbers. What matters is what the property is worth, what similar ones have sold for. So you got to measure, you got to balance it out. That's the next question. Okay, seller, you want 438, but what is it worth? What could a house like this sell for today? And hopefully the news is better. In a market like this, maybe you find a range of value from 435 to 450, depending on how good the house was, how many updates, how updated the kitchens and baths are. So all of those things sort of play in. And then what Will is saying, he's saying you could try to create a multiple offer situation. And if it's worth every bit of 438, because we've proven that by looking at similar comparables of houses that have sold recently, then maybe we price it at 435 or 430 even. And we just sort of gamble like on eBay or an auction. You have a no reserve auction and you're like, well, if they start at zero on their bidding, maybe they'll be so excited about getting a deal, they'll just keep on bidding up and up and up. And so if we start at 430, quite very likely could get well past the 438 because you've got bidders outbidding each other along the way. That's a real thing. So either the traditional add a little cushion and go higher than what you need, or price lower, closer to it at a point where the buyer is just so excited about the possibility of getting such a great deal, they can't help themselves from making an offer. And then emotion kicks in and they start out trying to outbid each other, which a fair point has happened quite a bit in these last 5 years. So it's a big, it's a kind of a guessing game, sort of a strategy thing, and it's going to depend on the broker and the seller as to what strategy they want to take. The broker will certainly give their opinion, and we just saw 3 or 4 opinions here in the chat, but ultimately it's the seller who determines that listing price with the guidance of us. All righty. We're going to do some more along this same chapter. We got a decent amount left to cover, but we're going to go straight on into chapter 9 after this. So we'll finish this out when I see you next week. Have a great weekend. Keep on reading ahead. Hope you had a good time. And we'll try to do a little more stuff to make this interactive and stick in your brains a little more, especially now that we're in these critical chapters. Name in the chat. Thank you very much. And I'll see you next week. Take care.